Greetings and salutations, friends and gamers of all stripes. My name is GM Dave. I am your man behind the screen. And this topic just can't stay buried, can it? No matter how many times this horse gets dredged up, no matter how many times it gets beaten. I mean, now it's been beaten to the point that its bones are dust fluttering in the wind. It doesn't matter. People keep dredging up this idea over and over and over, no matter how many times it's been disproven, no matter how many times it's been shown to be false, that evil creatures in fantasy and sci-fi are racist. Well, now it's Extra Credits doing that in a flailing and desperate attempt to regain some of their lost relevancy. An attempt that, in my opinion, fails. But hey, you can judge that for yourself, because I've got a link to their video on the subject in the description box down below. And while you're down there, make sure you follow me on my social media presences, in particular Minds.com, where I back up all of my videos, and take a look at my webcomic, Phoenix Rising, the most recent episode of which just went up last weekend. So, Extra Credits is tackling the evil races are racist thing. Only they're attempting to take a different angle with it. They are attempting to claim that evil races are bad game design. I recorded another version of this video earlier. I wasn't particularly happy with it. It was very rambly, and I don't think I got my point across as effectively as I could have. So, let me put it this way first. I don't agree with what they're saying. I don't agree with this idea. I think it's absolute nonsense, and it shows that the guys at Extra Credit, while they've always been sort of singular in their focus and beliefs, even as far back as 6 years ago when I used to watch them, never fully agreed with them, but at least they used to be able to provide some interesting ideas, some interesting things to think about and consider, even though the majority of the time I didn't agree with them. Now, it's just the typical woke nonsense. And that's exactly what this most recent video of theirs is. It's that typical approach of, fantasy races that are evil are just bad. Only, as I mentioned, they're claiming that it's bad game design. In my opinion, that is utter nonsense. It's not bad game design. And although it is very clear from the way they frame this argument that the target is D&D, its clones, and its contemporaries, because they specifically mention the 4 alignment axis in that video. I can think of one series of games right off the top of my head that disproves their point merely by virtue of its existence. But before I get to that, I want to mention a game that they discuss. They mention, towards the end of it, how the Mass Effect series handles this approach of races and species being viewed as inherently evil or having inherent traits. The argumentation that they are using for why this is a problem is that it plays to making moral arguments using bioessentialism, which, for those of us who play particularly the fantasy-themed races, or the fantasy-themed games, I should say, we understand that that's ridiculous. It's not bioessentialism that makes orcs the way they are, or elves, or dwarves. It's supernatural, cosmological. It ties directly to their gods, to magic, to the supernatural way in which these non-human races came about. Every single one of the non-human races in these fantasy games has a supernatural background that ties into a detailed creation myth going all the way back to the first of their kind, which was their core god or goddess. Every time, without fail, you will find in every major D&D clone, in D&D itself, and all of its contemporaries that this is the case. But putting that aside, what do they talk about with Mass Effect? Well, they mention how a couple of the races in that game, the first game, they're viewed in very much a one-dimensional kind of light. Shepard makes mention of certain races. Oh, these guys they never smile, they're never fun, they never joke around. These guys are always serious, these guys are always militant. And through the course of the games, through the course of the series, you meet members of those species that defy that. And it broadens the moral complexity and social complexity of that series, which for Mass Effect is perfect. That's one of the main things Mass Effect focuses on. Character relationships, interspecial relationships, that sort of thing. That's a big part of those games. Moral complexity, moral issues, moral dilemmas is a big part of the Mass Effect series. However, there's a video game series out there that has been around for decades that very much has the setup of you as the protagonist, the player character, are good. The enemies that you are facing, all of which are under the same subgroup, are bad. Unquestionably, unequivocally, there is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. This enemy that you face is bad, is evil, they are irredeemable. You are here to kill them and stop what they are doing. That game is Doom. From the very first one way back in the 90s to Doom Eternal, which just came out last year, or 2019 actually, so 2 years ago. 2021 still feels so much like 2020 that I just think it's 2020 still, even though we're 4 months in. There has never been, throughout the entirety of the Doom franchise, every single one of those games has always portrayed the demons as inherently evil. Every single time. Without fail. You are not meant to empathize with them. You are not meant to feel bad for them. You are not meant to question what their aims and goals are. They are trying to kill you. They have killed everyone you know, everyone around you. Most of the people they have killed, they have brought back as possessed or zombies, corrupting their human forms against their will. And so you kill them to stop them from doing it to more people. It's a very black and white, good versus evil kind of story. There's no moral dilemmas. It just is. And it is never once questioned whether or not the demons in Doom feel bad about what they're doing or question it. No, this is just their demons. It's just what they do. Which means that Doom falls under this same umbrella of argumentation that orcs and other fantasy and sci-fi races, the kinds of races extra credits are describing, the kind of races are saying are examples of bad game design because of how they are sometimes portrayed in games that portray them this way. Doom falls under that same umbrella. Is the game design in Doom bad just because the demons are portrayed as inherently evil, and that is never questioned? No, of course not. Because the morality of the demons, that's not part of the focus of Doom. That's not the goal of Doom. This idea that inherently evil creatures is bad game design is absolutely ridiculous, because it completely ignores the fact that whether or not that's bad game design depends entirely on what the goal of the game is. Is one of the goals of your game to explore the complexities of moral decision-making and moral dilemmas? Well, then if you're portraying the primary antagonist throughout your game as inherently evil from beginning to end, in that case, yeah, that would be bad game design, because it goes directly against the goal of exploring the morality of your decisions. Or their decisions. But if the goal of your game is to have a high-action slaughterfest like Doom, or even just to play something grimdark and dangerous, where there are monsters and there are supernatural entities beyond our understanding that have made things a certain way, that force these creatures to behave a certain way that we, as the victims of those creatures, the potential victims of these other creatures, would view as evil because, hey, these things are trying to kill us. These things are coming for us actively. They might not be entirely in control of it. They might have a cruel god that's forcing them to do it. There might be some other force forcing them to do it. But we're still going to see that as evil because we are being made the victims. If the goal of your game is to set up a simple good versus bad scenario in order to set up a fun, exciting, high-octane combat situation, or something that's a little more focused on tactics, something that isn't focused on moral dilemmas or building the most super rich character interactions between you and the bad guys, if the focus is a little bit more on interactions within the party and the party is coming together to face off this common enemy, something like that, then no. Making an inherently evil foe is not necessarily bad game design. It's simple game design. It's simple game design that reinforces your goal with the game. Now, there is another aspect to this which Extra Credits touches on near the end of their video. They make mention that this idea of an inherently evil foe is not necessarily something you always have to avoid. That if you want a game where you have a focus where it's more on tactics or more on high-octane combat, then yeah, absolutely, you could have something like that. You could totally display an enemy that is inherently evil. But you have to show that it's a choice that they're making. You have to make it an external factor. So putting them in something like a Nazi uniform or a Klan hood, or let's say you're playing in the Marvel universe and they have the Hydra symbol somewhere on their uniform. That's an okay way to do it. Because they're making the choice to be evil. There's just one major flaw in their argumentation there, though. Can you figure out what it is? I'll give you a moment to think. Okay, moment's up. Did you figure out what the flaw is? Well, if you haven't, I'll tell you. The argument that they're working with is that portraying a species as evil is bad because bioessentialism. You shouldn't use bioessentialism to make a morally essentialist argument. However, putting a bad guy in a Nazi uniform or a Klan hood or a Hydra uniform, some sort of uniform that signifies like, yes, they are evil, they are the baddies, that makes it okay. Then you can do a simple, this is evil, I am good sort of dilemma. Only, the whole problem is, Extra Credits, you're trying to tie real-world examples to fantasy, to argue that setting up a moral dilemma for fantasy races, that's good game design. That is good game design. It is good game design to make it so these fantasy races are complex, and to not use bioessentialism to make them automatically bad. Even though we've already pointed out, the vast majority of the time it's not bioessentialism. It's a supernatural outside force causing them to be this way. Well, I can make a perfectly cogent real-world example for why you should feel bad about killing these Nazis, or these Klanners, or even the Hydra members. Because you see, when we look at history, when we look at regimes like these, be it the Nazis, when we look at groups like the Klan, groups like even the Black Panthers, or the Black Hebrew Israelites, when you look at Islamic terrorists, when you look at certain communist regimes, when you look at real-world history, these groups that are often seen as villainous, these groups that many people look at and say, what they did was wrong, what they did was evil, what they did to other people was reprehensible. How often does it turn out that some of these people went along with it so that they wouldn't have their lives destroyed? That they didn't necessarily believe this, but they made themselves culpable. They went along with it to try and protect their families. How often does it turn out that some of these people involved were indoctrinated and brainwashed from a young age, fed lies about the world over and over, propagandized to? Even the Nazis. I mean, I would say, honestly, most notoriously, the Nazis are very well known for having done this. The Hitler Youth Program, things like that. Extra Credit says it's okay to throw these uniforms on and then you could say, yeah, they're the bad guys because they made the choice. You don't know they made the choice? How do you know that, Extra Credits? How do you know that this particular soldier, this particular mook that you happen to be gunning down in Medal of Honor or Wolfenstein, how do you know they chose to believe this? How do you know they made this choice? How do you know they weren't recruited at the age of 4 and taught these things since they were an impressionable child, brainwashed into believing this? How do you know it was a choice they made? How do you know they didn't do this to try and protect their families from punishment? I don't know, Extra Credits. It kind of sounds like just slapping the uniform on them and saying they're bad, it's okay to kill them there is bad game design by your own logic. And that's why the logic and the idea that they're pushing doesn't really work. Because it completely ignores what the goal of the game is. Just like Doom, Wolfenstein is not looking to present a morally complex world. No. It's an action game where you're the lone action hero gunning down the bad guys. You're the champion fighting off the enemy against all odds. You're beating them back with a heavy-ass arsenal, blowing them to pieces. It's the same as Doom. The only difference is, instead of gunning down demons ripping their way through portals out of hell, you're gunning down a bunch of cybernetically augmented Nazis. Different game types, different goals, different ways of achieving those goals. If the ideas you're playing with, the representations you're playing with, the moral dilemmas or lack of them, the way you're portraying these creatures, the way you're portraying your adversaries, if it works against the goals of your game, the goal of what you're trying to do, that is when it is bad game design. It is not bad game design just because the creatures in there or the enemies in there might be portrayed as inherently bad. It's all contextual. It is all based on the specific goals you have in mind for the game you're playing. And that's all I have for you today, friends and gamers of all stripes. As usual, my name is GM Dave. I am your man behind the screen. If you liked the video, leave a like, subscribe if you haven't already. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments down below. Again, please go and watch the video from Extra Credits. Listen to what they have to say. Judge for yourself before watching this one. I mean, it's kind of pointless for me to repeat that part at the end here, but, you know, whatever. Give it a watch. Give it a listen, hear what they have to say, and then come back and tell me what you think. Do you think there's some merit there that I missed? Do you agree with me? Do you not? Let me know why. Let's have a discussion on this in the comments down below. And with that said and done, friends and gamers of all stripes, my name is GM Dave. I am your man behind the screen. And remember, in the world of tabletop gaming, you do not want to just sit back and watch. Get in there and game.